In the murky twilight of consciousness, Edgar stirred, not born of flesh and blood, but as a shadow, an echo of something far more sinister. He found himself tethered to a being whose essence reeked of corruption and malice, a serial killer whose soul was as dark as the void Edgar now inhabited. The realization was suffocating, like being born into a coffin. The killer's lair was a grotesque mockery of normalcy, with walls that seemed to pulse with a malignant life of their own. Edgar, still grappling with his nascent awareness, watched helplessly as his host prepared for another hunt. The tools of the trade were laid out with care. A blade that gleamed with a hungry light, ropes that slithered like serpents, anticipating their next meal. Each item was a testament to the horrors that were to come, and Edgar could do nothing but observe, a silent witness to the madness. The first excursion into the killer's mind was a jolt that tore through Edgar's being. He found himself in a space that defied logic, a room filled with dolls. Each one was a meticulous representation of a victim, their glassy eyes reflecting moments of terror and despair. As the killer's thoughts wandered amongst them, the dolls began to animate, their voices a chorus of the damned. "Thank you," they whispered, their voices a macabre melody. "Thank you for freeing us from life's cruel grasp." But their words were twisted, dripping with the poison of the killer's psyche. They spoke of gratitude for their own end, a gratitude that was never theirs to give. It was a theater of the perverse, where innocence was violated and death masqueraded as mercy. Edgar tried to recoil, to flee from the horror unfolding before him, but he was bound to the darkness, a prisoner of the shadow. The room felt like a mausoleum, each doll a headstone marking a life stolen too soon. The air was thick with the stench of decay, not of flesh but of the soul, as the killer relived each murder with a twisted fondness that made Edgar's essence quake. This was his existence now, a tethered specter to a monster of flesh and blood. There was no escape, no respite from the torrent of malice that flowed from the killer's heart. Edgar was condemned to watch, to bear witness to the atrocities that humans could inflict upon each other, a silent guardian to a legacy of blood. Edgar understood the true horror of his situation. He was not just a shadow. He was a reflection of the abyss, a dark mirror to the depravity of the human condition. As night unfurled its sinister cloak over the city, Edgar found himself ensnared in the killer's murky thoughts once more. This time, however, a new presence made itself known, a whisper that slithered through the darkness like a serpent, insidious and cold. It was not the killer's voice that spoke, but something else, something ancient and malevolent that lurked in the recesses of his mind. The whisper was a constant nagging presence, a voice that promised power and delivered damnation. It guided the killer's hand, a puppeteer pulling strings soaked in blood. Edgar, despite being a mere shadow, felt a chill that seemed to penetrate his very essence as he listened to the dark entreaties of the inner demon. The killer paced the confines of his lair, his movements erratic, as if driven by an unseen force. The whisper grew louder. It spoke of the next victim, painting their fate with gory detail that made Edgar's form waver, as if threatening to dissipate. "Find her," the whisper hissed, its voice a blend of pleasure and pain. "End her light. Bathe in the crimson that flows from her, and feel the ecstasy of release." The killer's eyes gleamed with a fervor that was not entirely his own, a reflection of the darkness that had taken root within him. Edgar watched, horror-stricken, as plans were laid with meticulous care. Each step orchestrated by the demon's whispers, the choice of victim, the method of capture, the instruments of death, all were influenced by the malevolent entity that had made the killer its vessel. As the night deepened, the killer set forth into the darkness, a shadow among shadows. Edgar trailed behind, powerless powerless to do anything but observe the unfolding nightmare. The city, alive with the oblivious hustle and bustle of nighttime revelers, was unaware of the predator in its midst. The anticipation built to a crescendo as the killer stalked his prey, guided by the whispers that only he could hear. Edgar felt each step as a weight upon his soul, a descent further into the abyss that seemed to have no end. The moment of capture was swift, brutal, and devoid of mercy, a testament to the demon's influence. Back in the lair, the killer prepared his tools, each movement precise and deliberate. The whisper was ecstatic, its vile excitement palpable in the charged air. Edgar, forced to witness the horror, felt a despair so profound it threatened to consume him. He was a spectator to a tragedy that played out in the most grotesque manner, a tragedy where the killer was both the villain and the victim. The act itself was a ritual of blood, a perverse offering to the demon that lurked within. Edgar watched as the killer, with hands guided by something other than human will, took a life in the most horrific manner imaginable. The victim's screams echoed in the shadow's form, a haunting melody of pain and fear that would never leave him. As the deed was done, the whisper in the shadows turned its attention to Edgar, its malevolence palpable. "You are but a wraith, powerless to change the course of fate," it taunted. "Your existence is tied to his, and together you are bound to me." The revelation shook Edgar to his core. He was not just a witness to the killer's madness. He was a participant in a dance macabre orchestrated by a demon that reveled in suffering and death. The weight of this truth was a shackle around his non-existent heart, a constant reminder of his helplessness in the face of absolute evil. The night air was thick with a palpable sense of dread as Edgar, still reeling from the demon's scornful revelation, found himself delving deeper into the killer's psyche, desperate to disrupt the cycle of violence, even if just for a moment. He sought to unearth something, anything that could serve as a lever against the darkness. What he found instead were the killer's memories, a twisted maze of pain and cruelty that stretched back to his earliest days. The memories unspooled like a horror film, each scene more harrowing than the last. Edgar was thrust into a dingy, decrepit house where the air was heavy with the stench of neglect and despair. It was here, in this house of horrors, that the killer's soul had first been marred by the twin specters of a violent father and a neglectful, unhinged mother. The father was a towering figure of rage, his presence filling every corner of the house with fear. Edgar watched, heart in his non-existent throat, as the young boy who would become the killer cowered in the face of his father's fury. The beatings were routine, delivered with a ferocity that left the boy broken, both physically and mentally. His pleas for mercy were met with scorn, his tears with laughter. The mother, far from a source of solace, was lost in her own fractured reality. Her moments of clarity were few and far between, and when they did come, they were tinged with madness. She spoke to shadows, danced with ghosts, and treated her son as an afterthought, a nuisance that interrupted her dalliances with the invisible. In this hellish environment, the boy's only companions were the rats that scurried in the walls and the insects that crawled underfoot. Edgar felt each moment of neglect, each instance of abuse, as if they were his own, the memories burning into his consciousness like acid. It was in these darkest moments that the demon had first whispered to the boy, its voice a balm to his tormented soul. "I can make the pain stop," it promised. "I can give you the power to never feel helpless again." Desperate for any escape from his suffering, the boy had listened, and so the pact was made, the demon's influence seeping into him like poison into a well. Edgar, witnessing these memories, understood now the depths of the killer's brokenness, the roots of his evil. But this understanding brought no comfort, for it also laid bare the insurmountable task of saving a soul that had been consigned to darkness from its very inception. As the killer slept, restless and haunted by his own demons, Edgar attempted to use these memories to instigate a moment of self-reflection, a pause in the cycle of violence. He conjured visions of the boy's past, hoping to awaken some remnant of humanity, some sliver of remorse. But the demon was ever watchful, and its grip was ironclad. It twisted the memories into grotesque parodies, where the beatings were deserved, the neglect justified. "They made you strong," it whispered, its voice a sickening caress. "They forged you into the instrument of my will." The killer awoke with a start, his eyes alight with renewed fervor. The demon's lies accepted as truth. Edgar's attempt to intervene had only served to deepen the killer's resolve, to steel him for the horrors to come. Edgar, trapped within this dance of death, watched with a sense of mounting dread as the killer, emboldened by the demon's manipulations, prepared for his most vile act yet. Tonight's target, chosen by the whispers of ancient evil, was to be a testament to the killer's complete surrender to the darkness. As they neared the unsuspecting home, the killer's mind was a cacophony of twisted thoughts and demonic urgings, a symphony of savagery that Edgar was powerless to silence. The plan was meticulous, born of the demon's strategic malevolence and the killer's own fractured psyche. They would strike swiftly, a terror unleashed in the dead of night, leaving behind a scene that would haunt the dreams of those who discovered it. The entry was silent, a shadow slipping through the cracks of the world unnoticed. The house was dark, its inhabitants lost in the vulnerable innocence of sleep, unaware of the nightmare that had come to visit. Edgar watched, his form a vortex of powerless rage and sorrow. As the killer ascended the stairs, each step a tolling bell in the cathedral of damnation. The mother, the chosen victim, slept peacefully, a serene expression on her face that belied the horror that was about to unfold. The killer paused, savoring the anticipation, the demon whispering encouragements, painting vivid pictures of the bloodshed to come. It was a moment suspended in time, the precipice upon which madness and evil danced their macabre waltz. Then, with a swiftness that betrayed no hesitation, the killer struck. The violence was unspeakable, a brutality that went beyond mere physical destruction. It was a desecration of the very essence of life, an act so heinous that it seemed to tear at the fabric of reality itself. Edgar, forced to witness this abomination, felt a scream rise within him, a silent howl of despair and revulsion that echoed in the void where his heart once beat. In the midst of the carnage, the demon's voice rose triumphant, a dark lord reveling in the success of his acolyte. But it was the words it directed at Edgar that cut the deepest, a cruel barb that pierced the shadow's non-being with a pain that was all too real. Your mission to protect is folly, a fool's errand against a power you cannot comprehend. You are weak, Edgar, and you will change nothing. The act was over as quickly as it had begun, leaving behind a tableau of terror that would scar the survivors for life. The killer, his deed complete, retreated into the night, leaving Edgar to hover in the aftermath, a silent sentinel amidst the devastation. In the cold, gray light of dawn, the city awoke to a nightmare made manifest. News of the brutal murder spread like wildfire, a morbid tale of inhuman cruelty that chilled the blood of all who heard it. Edgar, the silent shadow tethered to the architect of this horror, hovered in the liminal space between existence and oblivion, a spectator to the aftermath of the atrocity he had been powerless to prevent. The realization was a descent into madness, a fall into an abyss from which there was no escape. Edgar's consciousness fragmented, his sense of self unraveling as the weight of his impotence crushed him. The demon's laughter echoed in the void, a sound that was both triumphant and mocking. Your mission to protect is folly, a fool's errand against a power you cannot comprehend. You are weak, Edgar, and you will change nothing.